Hi, welcome to A Mirror Darkly, Unbridled Inquiry. Today our topic is U.S. immigration policy in a good place? This could be extremely short or extremely long, depending on the length of your answer. So that is the topic we're going to be tackling today. And first, let me say in the way of announcements, next Saturday we will not be broadcasting because he'll be on a flight back from Ohio at that time, and you don't want to hear me by myself. I'm not very interesting. So anyway, don't try and join us next week, but we will be here the following Saturday.
That's July 3rd, is that the case?
Oh, wait. No, it's the 27th or 29th or something. Or is that what this is?
This is June
5th. No, it's a whole month away.
Never mind. Yeah. So
neither of us is very good with the calendar, apparently.
Apparently.
So anyway, obviously July 4th weekend we won't be airing because it's a holiday, and we'll be at Disneyland going to Star Wars Land. So that's my birthday present from my kids. So, I also need to let you know that we do have a lot of wind today, so it will affect our stream. So we apologize. Usually YouTube is most effective, but I'm noticing Facebook is having some issues with it as well. So just be aware of the fact that if you're having connection issues, it's all us. Well, it's all the wind.
Yes.
But anyway, we're kind of in a semi-rural area, and so our connection to the internet is a wire that hangs from a pole to our building, and when it blows in the wind, we get shaky connection. So anyway, so we apologize in advance for that. So with that being said, I'm Ruth, this is Robin, and you're tuned in, and so let's talk about U.S. immigration policy, and we would love to hear your comments. We do run the show in 10-minute segments, so if you have a comment or a question, we will stop at the end of the 10 minutes and bring those things up. And if you have a show idea for future shows, please let us know, because we are looking for show ideas, and we'll be happy to push back whatever we already have planned and put your topic in there. So anyway, take it away with U.S. immigration policy.
Okay.
While I drink my coffee.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Well, first, a program change is going to happen. I'm planning on doing for obviously not next week, but maybe the week after. We'll do a segment on anti-Semitism.
Oh, okay.
Because I've noticed that is increasingly popular in some circles.
Yes.
I feel a need to talk about it.
Oh, teachers union is it San Francisco?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also in LA, the LA Unified
Oh, okay.
is voting on it.
Okay.
So, yeah, anti-Semitism is increasingly mainstream,
Yeah.
and that's an unfortunate thing. Not that it's something entirely new. Anti-Semitism tends to come and go from the mainstream on a regular basis, but we'll talk about that next time.
Okay.
U.S. immigration policy. I've been annoyed with U.S. immigration policy probably since the 1980s. We had a friend who came to the United States from Iraq, and he had been persecuted in Iraq. He was a Christian, and he had been imprisoned for a while as a consequence of leading some Bible studies. Oddly enough, he was also one of the people that worked at Iraq's nuclear facility, which the Israelis later bombed. Not while he was there; he was in the U.S. by that point. But anyway, he's, intelligent person, well trained, had good English skills, nuclear physicist, and persecuted for being a Christian. He had come to this country legally. He had followed all the rules as they were then in place. And our wonderful immigration people told him that they were going to deport him.
Where he would have certainly been killed.
Yes,
had he gone back.
Where he would certainly have been killed had he gone back. He had family here in the U.S., or sister and brother-in-law.
Something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, we thought that was rather odd. And in talking to the people at the immigration place, they told him that, if he had come in illegally, if he had snuck in, then there wouldn't be much they could do about him. But because he had followed all the rules, they knew where he was. Bye-bye. We finally, through getting the local congressperson involved, were able to keep the immigration people from deporting him.
And a lot of prayer, too.
And a lot of prayer. The whole church was involved where we were at the time, and thankfully we happened to, one of the people in the church knew the congressman, and so was able to get him to intervene. And despite the fact that the immigration people tried to pretend that that had nothing to do with their change in heart, it very obviously did. But obviously, having gone through all of that and said all of this, there are some serious issues with the immigration department if that's their attitude and the way they approach things. And it's not new. I mean, it's been in the news for the last quite a while now, last 4 or 5 years, but it's been a mess for a very, very long time, and it has not gotten any better. That is, the basic flaws with the service remain. People who want to become U.S. citizens, it is a very long, expensive, and difficult process. And once again, I don't think it should be that difficult. Part of the problem, too, with our immigration policies, and I don't use the term lightly, but they are racist at their core. That is, if you look at the regulations, the limitations are placed on who can immigrate from certain areas, and it's largely due to we don't want too many brown people here. And so that's obviously a problem, and nothing has changed. That is, through all the administrations from the 1980s till today, the policies have remained virtually unchanged. That is, Congress keeps them the same way, nobody changes anything. And the arguing that I see politically tends to be on peripheral issues that really don't change anything.
Tinkering around the edges.
Tinkering around the edges rather than looking at the actual central problems of the whole process. all nations control their borders and who can come in for how long and under what circumstances. That's normal. To imagine that controlling the borders is inherently racist is wrong. How we do it, though, tends to be racist, and that's unfortunate. And there seems to be no particular incentive for either political party to do anything about it. That is, they will talk and yap, but nothing fundamentally is done.
Well, I want to talk about the brown people issue, because our primary influx of immigrants that comes in happens to be from Mexico, Central America, and all that, where there are a lot of brown people. So when I was in Italy, they have a huge problem with illegal African immigrants, because south of them is Africa. And in those countries, you've got terrorist groups running countries, like the Mali has been pretty much taken over by Al-Qaeda. And you've got a lot of dictatorships and stuff on the African continent. And so a lot of those people are trying to get away from that. They're crossing the Mediterranean Sea and ending up in places like Italy. And so I would argue that it's not so much that we've picked this color to limit, it's just that's what the influx of humans
we have
is.
we have picked two to limit. That is, if you look
there's quotas for different countries.
If you look at the quotas for different countries, the quotas are primarily aimed at countries that are less pale.
Okay.
That's my point.
All right.
Is if you look at what the quotas actually are, the biggest quotas are on those parts of the world.
Okay.
And so, I mean, historically, there are huge quotas on Asian immigrants, particularly from China. California did not want to have as many Chinese coming into the state as what wanted to come. And so you have a lot of discrimination against Asians. And then you have the discrimination against people from South and Central America. Now, realistically, part of the reason that you have so many people from south of the border wanting to come to the United States is primarily because the economies and the governments of a lot of these countries in our, south of us, the economies are not very good. There's a shortage of jobs, and politically, they're not necessarily quite as enlightened as they should be, let's put it that way. And so that creates for people that are interested in working and people that want to advance, where they are is not a good place to be, and so they want to come up here, and they will do practically anything to get here. Now, realistically, those are exactly the kinds of people that we should want to have here. That is, hardworking, energized, determined people that are willing to go through hell and high water to better themselves. Why would we not want them to be here?
Right.
That I don't understand any of the opposition to these people coming up here. Now, obviously, you don't want them coming here illegally because, and there are a lot of reasons for not wanting them to come here illegally. One is they're being exploited by coyotes and others that are trafficking them and doing bad things to them.
And coyotes are not animals with children strapped to them, for those of you who live on the East Coast.
Yes, that are stupid.
Yeah.
Coyotes that live on the East Coast and also are not paying
human
attention.
Smugglers. Coyotes are what we call human smugglers from
it's a nickname
Mexico.
for them.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a novel a while back, somewhere obscurely, where I used that term for those who are transporting time-displaced workers. It's a time travel story, but same basic premise. But yeah, it's a criminal enterprise, and these people are being exploited, taken advantage of. They're having to dole out enormous amounts of money to be mistreated, and it's just not right. It's a bad thing. You don't want that. Plus, again, part of the point of having borders and the way the nation-state system has been working since the 1600s when it was established is that you want to have an idea of who it is that is coming. Just like you'd like to know who comes into your house, you want to know who's coming into your country. And so the best way of handling things would be to make it not so difficult for people to come here, and then to regulate it in a reasonable way so that we know who it is that's come in here, where they're going, what their goals are. You know, you might get some money out of them, you know, tax them a little bit. Governments like to get fees out of people,
Yes.
so a reasonable amount of fees is to be expected. I mean, if you were to try to immigrate to England or Canada or any other country, they would charge you for that, and so that's not an unreasonable thing. That's normal. Governments exist on the basis of the taxes they render, and depending, you can call them anything you want, but it's a tax, and that's what governments do. That they can do pretty easily, and they're good at it.
Call it a general admission ticket.
Yes. But to have the quotas, I think, is an error, and to make it as difficult for people to get here and to get on a path to citizenship, should that be what they want, it should not be as difficult as it is. It is not as time consuming, where it takes you 10 years and you have to go through a whole bunch of hoops and it costs you an enormous amount of money. It should not be that
Yeah.
hard. I mean, you do, if somebody's going to become a citizen of the United States, given the soul of the U.S. is that it's an idea, you want them to know and understand, although most people that are coming here kind of have a sense of what the U.S. is all about, but yeah, go ahead and give that to them. The people that are immigrating here have not had the benefit of potentially paying attention in their high school civics and social studies classes to learn how the U.S. government and system work.
Well, and like when I graduated, in order to graduate from high school in Arizona, I take Arizona history. And I imagine that's something you have to do probably in each state.
Yes, in fact, given the fact that my father was in the U.S. military, we moved a lot, and so I had to learn the history of the state of Nevada, history of the state of Ohio, history of the state of Oklahoma, history of the state of Florida, and so on.
Good thing you liked history.
Yeah, it was. Every place we moved, I had to take the history of that state. And so yeah, every state does that, which is reasonable. It's just if you move a lot, it gets annoying.
Another interesting thing too is that I was listening to a YouTube video today. Jordan Peterson interviewed a girl who had escaped from North Korea, and when she finally got to South Korea, once they determined that she wasn't a spy and that she was a legit refugee from North Korea, they put her into school to learn how to be free, how to do South Korean culture, which is quite similar to ours, like what a bank is, because in North Korea they don't know what banks are, how to use an ATM, how to use a telephone, because they don't have those things because they don't have electricity. Unless you're part of the Kim family, you don't have electricity, and so you don't have things like phones and television. They don't have the internet. They don't even know that there is the internet. And so she had to learn how to use the internet and all that. It's a really fascinating interview. If you have 2 hours, it's a good way to spend 2 hours of your life, to be honest. But anyway, so, and it's to help them assimilate and to teach them how to survive, because like my mother, when she came to the States, she didn't know how to get a job. Whoever she lived with, I think it was an uncle, had to teach her how to get a job.
No, because your mother had been raised and grown up in Africa.
Right.
Specifically Kenya.
Right. And so having a job wasn't, she was in boarding school, and so having a job wasn't something that she needed or could or had to get. I mean, I suppose if she wanted to, if she'd lived in the city, maybe she would. I don't know.
Nairobi or something.
Yeah.
Like
But anyway.
out in the wilderness, not so much.
Yeah, so she had to learn those things when she came here, and I think it would be a good idea, and I think it is a good idea. Like, they do have to take civics classes and stuff to know what the Constitution's about, and the Declaration of Independence and the flag salute and things like that. but there should, and I don't know what all it entails, but it should include, especially from certain countries, it should include some of those very, American things,
Well, from the people that we know that have become U.S. citizens and have gone through that process, that's what they say they have to do.
Okay.
So, and the interesting thing is, oftentimes the immigrants that have become U.S. citizens, they know the Constitution, our history better than people that are born and raised here, because high school students and junior high students and elementary kids don't always pay attention to school very carefully.
Yes.
I mean, I cannot count the number of times that I've heard parents complain, well, my children are never taught that in school. Yeah, they were. Your students didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
Don't blame the school.
Yeah. My kids learn, not this year because you can't do things in unison over Zoom, we use WebEx. But anyway, so this class didn't learn the preamble to the Constitution, but I basically teach them that we did analyze it, and they know that it's the main idea sentence of the Constitution, so everything that's in the Constitution is mentioned all in the preamble. I didn't learn the preamble until junior high, but I recited it for my class this year, and they were like, wow. I said, yeah, well, if you were in person, you'd be learning this. We'd be saying it every day. So they do the flag salute, we do the preamble to the Constitution, we learn patriotic songs, and along with our skip counting and other stuff we do first thing in the morning. But a lot of kids don't get it that intensely.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily, and
And
don't
then they
think
don't
that
always
it's
remember
a
it.
uniquely American thing. When I was in Israel, Israel has 3 official languages: Hebrew, Arabic, and English. And so all children growing up in Israel are taught those languages. Some of them are very good at English. Some of them are not. This is because some pay attention and some don't. This is the nature of children growing up and being in school. Some are good students and some aren't. That's just life.
Yep.
So it's not a uniquely American thing not to pay attention in school. It's everywhere.
Yep.
And, people sometimes worry about immigrants, they don't speak English. If they come from a country that's not an English-speaking country, how are they going to survive? Well, your ancestors somehow managed. I'm sure these people will be able to do as well. The normal pattern for immigrants in coming to the United States, and we've seen this over the last 200 years, so this is not, we've got lots of data on it. First generation, their learning of English will be marginal, usually. Sometimes, some of them will do really well and they'll get it right away, like my friend from Iraq. His English is excellent, and of course he's been here for, 30, 40 years now. And if you ask him, he says that he doesn't remember Arabic that well anymore, so because all he does is English.
Well, doesn't he speak Farsi? Isn't Farsi the...
No, Iraq is Arabic.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Farsi.
Iran is Farsi.
Oh, okay. I was getting mixed up.
Farsi is the Persian word for Persian.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what Iran is. It's Persia.
Oh, okay.
And so they speak Persian, which is Farsi. If you do a
Okay.
direct, take their pronunciation of their language. Like the Hebrew pronunciation of Hebrew is Ivri.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't sound a whole lot like the English word Hebrew, but
Right.
that's what it means.
Okay.
So Farsi is the Farsi word for Persian. There you go,
Learn something every
language
day.
lesson. Anyway, my point is that the first generation may or may not pick up English well. The second generation, they'll know English really well. They may or may not pick up the parents' native language. They'll be marginal, but they should have some
Amount of
both.
bilingualism.
Some amount of bilingualism, but their English will be really good. Third generation, they'll only know English.
Yeah.
And it's always that way. That is the pattern. And so people, freak out, oh, these people coming from Spanish-speaking countries, it's going to overwhelm us. No. English is a 300-pound gorilla or a 900-pound gorilla. It takes over everything. But it's the same no matter what country you would happen to immigrate
Right.
to. If you were to immigrate to France, you would learn French marginally, maybe well. Your children would know French really well and maybe remember some English, and their children would only speak French. It's
Right.
just the way it works.
And some people say, well, I would make sure that I learn it before I move there. Well, that's fine if you come from a country of wealth like the United States where it's available to you. But if you come from a country of poverty or third world country, that may not be available to you. And so that's not the preparation that you're making when you're leaving your country. Usually it's figuring out what you can take with you and getting out of Dodge.
Yeah, you're
So-
leaving your home country because things are not ideal for you there, and you
Right.
want something better.
Yeah. So now my mother was prepared language-wise to come to the States because my grandparents knew that she would be coming back here when she graduated high
And
school.
her parents were English speakers. They were from the U.S.
Right.
but-
So they made sure, although English wasn't dominant in the house, my mother's first language was Luo, I think. But but they made sure that the children knew English so that when they came back to the States, they could speak English and could get, an education and things like that.
Right.
So,
That's important.
yes.
But, I suspect that fixing the immigration policy of the U.S. would not be that difficult. It's just that there's no will to do so.
Right.
Because for one thing, from the standpoint of our politicians, there's no reason politically to do anything about it because it doesn't affect them. It doesn't help them get reelected. That is, doing complete revamp of the immigration policies and procedures of the U.S., although it's a good thing.
But what
Why
does help them get reelected is using immigration as a pawn.
Yes.
So it's like, I'm going to be hard on immigration like the last president, and I'm going to build a wall, and I'm going to, and then all the conservatives rally around and be like, yay, we have a president who understands what we want.
No.
And then the next president is like, let's have no borders, let's give everything away for free. And then the people that like free stuff and want higher taxes gather around that and be like, yeah, let's have that, because this mean guy keeping everybody out, that was not good.
And the reality is nothing has changed.
Right.
See,
And it just swings back and forth
despite
and
the
back and
rhetoric
forth.
and despite what either side says, fundamentally the process remains exactly as dysfunctional and exactly as messed up as it's always been, and there is no incentive to make an alteration because you're not going to get votes, you're not going to rally the troops, there's no political benefit. And unless there's political benefit, politicians really don't care.
Yep.
And the reality is, too, that most Americans don't really care either because it doesn't affect them. You're already here. Who cares? And so the policy has been there for a long time, more than 100 years, and it just keeps puttering along as it is because it's sort of not working very well, but it's still puttering along, so we'll make do with it.
If it ain't completely broken, don't tinker with
Yeah,
it.
and so they tinker around the edges. So, for instance, a few years ago, they changed the name from INS
yeah.
to ICE. Big change.
Yeah.
No, not at all. They get new uniforms, new
This
signs.
is not my dog, it's my canine, and now he's much better behaved.
Yeah, nothing has changed.
Oh.
And it's frustrating as you look at it because you can see that it's not really working well and people are suffering as a consequence. But there's nothing to compel people to do anything about it.
Compel.
Yeah. That is, the politicians don't care. The people that are already here don't really care. The immigrants, they
don't have any power.
They have
That's
no
just the way
power.
that it
That's
is.
just the way it is. And so things just stay this way and have forever. And it's hard for me to see how one would go about getting anything to change, which is sad. Because I don't really think the changes would be that difficult. But there's no political will to do it. And plus, some of the changes, like for instance, getting rid of the quotas and just letting anybody that comes, here's the forms you fill out, here's the money you pay, welcome, bump, bump, bump. There's a lot of conservatives, particularly, that would be uncomfortable with that because they think, well, that's just letting, wide open borders, which is not quite what it is. It's just that you are regulating it and controlling it, and you know who's here. If you make it easy like that, you'll eliminate the illegal issue where you have no idea who they are, where they are.
And the human trafficking issue.
You get rid of the human trafficking issue. You'll get rid of some amount of fraud because these people then, if they want to have jobs, will not be afraid, won't get stolen Social Security numbers or whatever. But yeah, more libertarian approaches to things are not popular.
And we have the technology
Yes.
to where we could, like facial recognition.
You could get some genetic material from them.
Get their DNA, get their facial recognition. If they commit a crime, you throw them back to where they came from, and you don't let them back in.
Most of these people that come here are not going to be committing crimes because most human beings don't.
Right. But you eliminate the bad elements like that because when they come in, they know you've got their DNA and they know you've got their face. So if they shoplift in Walmart, who does do facial recognition, then you've got them and you can ship them back, incarcerate them, put them before a judge, and then send them back to where they came from. And it would be so simple with today's technology. You just put their info into the computer and let them go in. And I am all for just charging people what it costs to do a thing.
Right.
So if it costs the government $10 a person to register someone as they come across the border, give us $10. We're going to register. Most people will do what you ask them to do in order to stay. Because people are doing what they need to do to get here and to stay. They're just doing it under the radar.
Because they have no choice.
Right.
Because trying to do it legally, there's only so many that are allowed, and then it's difficult on top of it. And so the incentive to try to cheat the system is very high. Plus also, like a friend that came from Iraq, you do things legally and you still get screwed over. So, yeah, things are not good for these people. And it's sad. It should not be this way.
Right.
And I think ultimately, too, that if the system were fixed like the one to have voice.
So now there are 30 million Chinese males who have no hope of finding someone to procreate with, someone to marry. Sex slavery is a big thing in China, especially amongst North Koreans who escaped from North Korea. That's a girl's ticket into China, is to be sold into sex slavery. You want to talk about human trafficking, it's bad there. That was part of that interview that I watched today. And anyway, so sex slavery is a big thing in China because there's just not enough women. So you buy yourself a slave and you got yourself a girl.
Yeah, but with human beings is that the more of us that you have, the more productivity you have, the more inventions there are, and you end up producing more stuff, more food than what you need. That is, we don't run out, we just find ways of creating more stuff because we're good at that. We're good at solving problems, we're good at coming up with solutions, and yeah, there is absolutely no shortage of anything as a consequence. That is, the only reason there's starvation today in the world is because of bad governments taking advantage of people and not distributing the food that's available.
North Korea, they're eating bugs.
Yeah, and that's ridiculous.
Because there's just no protein.
But there's more food on the planet than there are people to eat it.
And then friends of ours that were missionaries in the Mali in West Africa, our government would send free food to the Mali, and their government would take the food and sell it to the people. So these missionaries that we know, they would use their money that they were being given by the supporting churches and by supporting individuals to purchase the food from the government to give out for free. So the food was eventually getting to the people for free the way it was intended, but the missionaries were having to buy it from the government so that the people could get their free food.
Right.
And we have a surplus of food. We send it to countries that lack food. And, well, that's why I wonder about this.
There aren't that many countries that lack food, though. That is
anymore.
That is
right.
North Korea is a standout example. Venezuela has issues, but again, both of them have corrupt, nasty, horrible governments.
Right. And probably the Mali is still an issue because
of terrorism and who it is that's running. Again, bad government. But, India, China, places like that, eat your vegetables. There's people starving in China. No, there's not. It doesn't happen anymore because there's plenty of food.
Right. Well, in Ethiopia, you don't see people like trying to raise money to feed the starving children in Ethiopia.
Right, because the problem has been solved.
Right.
And again, the reason there were starving people in Ethiopia was because of bad government. But the point that we were getting to with all this is that having more people come into the United States will not be bad for us. It will be good for us. It will contribute to our society. We will not run out of stuff. We will not have a shortage of things. They will not eat up all our food and leave us with nothing. It's not like inviting teenagers into your house and they take everything out of your refrigerator, eat it, and then you've got nothing except ketchup for the next day.
Ketchup and baking soda.
That is, they will produce and things will be better as a consequence of having more people, because more people means good things. People are not a bad thing. And there is that attitude among some out there in the academic world that think that, humanity is the problem, and that's simply not the case. Humanity is usually the solution. Human beings are not bad. I mean, God, when he created human beings, at the end of the whole creation process in Genesis chapter 1, he said all things are good.
The only thing that was not good was that the man was alone.
Right.
That was
and God fixed that.
Yep. Man 2.0.
Yep.
That's what the "w" part means. 2.0 man. It's W.0. But yeah. And it's true. It's very true. We are definitely an improvement. Right?
Sure.
Smart. This is why he's been married a long time.
Yeah. So choose and recognizing the actual problem. They're just out there on the periphery, and they're using it all for political reasons and doing absolutely nothing to fundamentally fix what is wrong.
Yeah.
And what they say is wrong isn't. Immigrants are not bad people. They're not stealing jobs from people. That is, they contribute to the economy. They make things better. Software engineer up in Santa Barbara. So he's doing quite well for himself and, again, contributing to the economy. And whether or not he ever wanted to go back and visit Iraq, and he said, if I want to see palm trees, I'll go to Palm Springs. Those people are crazy, he said.
Yeah.
So, no. But again, I mean, if anybody I don't know that we've had any comments, but
No,
I'd
none.
really be curious to know if anybody has an idea of how you would ever get politicians to actually solve the real problem, rather than
they
just
won't
use it
because
as a political football.
right. It's just a political football, and so they wouldn't have anything to play with if they solved the problem.
That's true.
So,
And again, they have absolutely no incentive whatsoever to actually fix the problem.
Yep.
I'm not even sure if they know what the problem is or care to find out what the problems are. And I find that very sad. So yeah,
Well, even just the way the current administration is handling it, he turned it over to the vice president. She hasn't even gone to the border yet.
I know.
And you can't assess a problem unless you see it.
Yeah.
If you think you're sick and your doctor says, well, don't bother coming in, we'll just take some aspirin.
Yeah.
It's like, what if you have cancer? It's like, wow. So, you have to see the problem in order to assess it and all that. So even the current administration really is not doing anything about it. Just platitudes.
Like I said, from the time that we had our interaction with our friend from Iraq, from that point until now, I have seen nothing change.
Right.
Aside from the name of the organization that is doing this thing.
I mean, even the last administration did not really do anything.
No, they didn't.
Just enacted, basically all he did was say, okay, these are the rules. Let's enforce the rules.
Yeah, and the rules suck.
Yeah, and
That's
so
the
it was
problem.
like
The rules haven't changed.
Yeah.
The rules are still the same. It's just so sad.
I know.
And they don't fundamentally care.
Yep.
Because there's no reason for them to
Because their jobs
care.
and power are more important than people.
Which is, and this is something I always keep in mind about politicians in general and the way the political system works and it's both good and bad. They are incentivized to try to keep their constituents as happy as possible, which is the whole point. The Constitution is there to keep them from messing with us any more than what government wants to mess with us. That is, our founding fathers, their goal was to create a system of government that made allowance for human nature. And hence, part of the reason for 3 branches of government is it forces compromise all the time, because each branch is trying to do as much as it can for itself. But in order to get anything done, they've got these other 2 branches they've got to butt heads with. And so everybody keeps butting heads, and so they've got to keep compromising. They wanted to design a system that would work as slowly and as inefficiently as possible under most circumstances, and they succeeded. That's a feature, not a bug. Right. Efficiency is not something you want in governments. They had seen efficient governments, and efficient governments tend to goose step. You don't want that.
Yep.
They had experienced King George. They did not want to recreate that here. But the downside of all of this is that your members of the House of Representatives, your senators, your governors, your state legislature, all of these people, they want to keep their job. The way they keep their job is by keeping their constituents happy. Their constituents do not care about the guy trying to get here from Mexico. And therefore, the politician doesn't care either. And that's just the reality of it. And that's the case with any issue. Now, if the issue affects enough constituents in an area, then the politician is going to be interested. We've talked about mental health care in previous episodes, and that's part of the issue with it. That is, it doesn't impact that many people, and so there is not a lot of incentive to fix the problems that exist in how mental health care is done in the U.S. The percentage of people that suffer from mental illness is very small. Most people are afraid of people that suffer from mental illness, and so as long as those people are not bothering the bulk of the population, everybody's happy, except for those who have loved ones who are suffering from mental illness, in which case we're not very happy, but nobody will do anything.
Right. And until the tent cities end up on someone's doorstep that lives in a gated community, the tent city problem isn't going to be solved, which is a big problem with drugs and with mental health. And a lot of those people that are drug addicts have mental health issues and they're self-medicating.
Yeah, and so the largest mental health facility in the state of California is the
Prison system.
The prison system.
Yep.
That's where most of them are housed most of the time.
Yeah.
off and on. And people are not overly bothered by it, and so nothing changes. So one can see how things could be fixed, but the fix would not necessarily be that difficult or that expensive, any more than it would be for the immigration system. But there's no political will to do it.
Yep.
And I can't see how there ever will be.
Yeah.
Which is very frustrating.
Because it makes a great soapbox to stand on. You know, I'm going to solve the mental health issue, and then they don't do anything.
Right.
I'm going to solve the tent city problem, and
They don't
nothing
do
happens.
anything.
Yeah.
Again, they talk in peripherals and they use it as a political football in order to get votes, but they don't fundamentally do anything to actually fix these problems, because there's no reason to do it outside of just human kindness and
Right.
loving your neighbor as yourself. But that is not much motivation for most human beings,
Right.
particularly
And
political
that's
minds.
why they're so motivated by special interest groups, because as a group, like for example, we belong to NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. One of their things that they do is that they go to state government, they go to the federal government and say what the mental health needs are. And if there are enough people in an organization, if they can go and say, I represent 1 million Americans, I represent, 100,000 Americans, depending on if you're talking to City Hall or state government or whatever, they will listen to that, because that translates into votes.
Right.
So, think about it. If you're a supervisor at work and somebody comes to you and says, say you have 30 people that work under you, and somebody comes to you and says, I've come representing 20 of the people in this department, that this problem needs to be fixed, you're probably going to listen more than if one person is complaining at you, or even if you see something that's wrong, like this could probably be fixed, but yeah, nobody seems bothered by it, so we'll just move on with our lives.
Right.
And because most people aren't proactive, they react, they're not proactive.
Yes.
And so if you care about immigration policy, if you care about mental health issues, the best thing you can do is either join an organization or that represents your views, or write to your congressman, write to your senator, state level as well as federal level, and let them know that this is a problem and here's how it affects me. And you'll usually get some kind of a letter back. Usually it's a blow-off kind of thing initially.
Right.
But if you write enough times, they'll start to listen. And
or
if you get enough people.
If you have enough people
right.
behind you, it's
Right.
not just you as a lone person in the wilderness.
Don't become Cliff Clavin.
Yeah, it's not going to help.
Yeah. But
And I don't know that, there are groups that supposedly are working for immigration reform, but in my analysis of them, they don't really seem to be focusing on the fundamental issues. And that's what bothers me. That is, again, they're talking peripheral things, and a lot of the organizations, we need to do, what about all the illegal immigrants that are here? What can we do for them? And that's a reasonable thing to worry about, but that doesn't solve the problem of
Right.
the immigration system as a whole, which is thoroughly messed up and is not working properly. The reason we have illegal immigration is partially, two things. One is the bad governments that are south of our border. And number two, our immigration policy is that badly messed up. That's the canary in the coal mine that is dying, is the fact that you've got all these illegal immigrants. You don't want to, building a wall to keep these people out is not really solving the fundamental issue.
right.
The fundamental issue is
See your country, even if we fund the ability for that country to hold those people, and just like you keep them in this safe place, let them apply for asylum, the court will look at it within 30 days and determine if their claim is legitimate. And then if it is, then we'll transport them up here, and, you know, we'll pay for buses to bring them up, or pay a train, or, you know, something, pay their way up here.
But
I don't have
still
a problem
adding-
with paying for stuff either, because our country is a very wealthy country, and if you're paying for someone, you're eventually going to make that money back in their income taxes and all that kind of stuff. And you don't even have to charge them that much, you know, just whatever the fare would be to get up here or whatever. You know, there's a lot of little,
I mean, the way to
I'm
look
kinda
at
spitballing,
yeah,
but
well, the way to
still.
look at immigrants is here's a stack of dollar bills that wants to come in. Why are you
Yeah.
keeping them out? Because that's
Right.
what they are going to do. They will come in, they'll get a job, they'll work, they'll pay taxes. You'll make
But you wanna
the
make
country will make a
sure-
boatload off of them.
right, but you want to make sure that they're not part of an organized crime thing like MS-13 or whatever, because that, and the drug cartels are a big issue between, you know, south of us. Like almost every government south of us is controlled by the drug cartels.
Yeah, and see, that's of course an entirely separate issue, which is our U.S. drug policy, which is also very screwed up.
Right.
The libertarian solution, I think, is probably your best bet, but I mean,
Which
that's
is let people use drugs if they want to.
yeah, well, it's what we've done here in the state of California with marijuana. And although it only took the state of California to really screw up what they did, that is, they've made it very difficult and complex, and so they're not getting the tax dollars from it they should be getting, because they've made it very hard for legitimate businesses to, you know, sell the marijuana. But that's a whole nother issue.
Well, that would be a good show topic.
I suppose it
For
could
the
be.
future.
Yes, we talked about because the U.S. drug policy as it exists today isn't working.
Right. The war
So-
on drugs, just say no.
Yeah, it's not working, and so maybe we should try something entirely different.
Right. Well, and I also think too, try it, like test it on a small scale. Don't change the policy for everybody.
Well, that's what's happened with marijuana. That is, here in the
Uh-huh.
state of California, I think Colorado, a couple other states. How's it working? Seems to be okay.
I think because similarly, like with COVID, certain states handled their mask policy one way, some handled it another. It seems to have worked for some states, and other states it hasn't worked. So what things worked and what can we implement in our state that will work? Because not everything's going to work the same everywhere, because
Right.
you have different kinds of people. Like Florida, you have a much
of
older
older people.
population. You know, and then Arizona, likewise, a lot of people retired Arizona. And then like New York is a very compact situation where people live on top of each other. They're all using elevators. So what things
Public
can we
transit
use?
is used more frequently than what it is, say, here in California, where we go public transit. What's that?
Yeah, just when we didn't have a car that ran, then I was using public
Yeah,
transportation.
but we didn't like it, and we got a car as soon as we could.
Right. So, but, you know, what things, okay, so this state, it seems to be working. What things can we use that seem to work for them in our state? Do the same thing with drug policy, do the same thing with immigration even. You could run each state's border differently to
And
see what works
best.
and to fit the scenario. Like if you have a state that borders on a part of Mexico that's really heavily infested with drug cartels, you want to be really careful. But if you've got, say, a state that borders on a part of Mexico where there's less cartel activity, and then incentivize the Mexican government to crack down on these people.
Or if you
You
change
know?
the drug policy, then that'll
Right.
take care of a lot of the issues anyway. So
it's kind of
we're out of
complex.
time.
It's kind of like a braided rope.
Yes,
It's
it
a lot of
is.
pieces that get frayed easily. So I'm afraid. Ha ha ha.
yeah.
Okay, so remember, we will not be here next Saturday. I see that Steve joined us
Yes,
today. Hi,
because I'll
Steve.
be out of town.
Yes.
Well, I'll
and
be getting back into town, but I'll be late.
yes, his plane doesn't get until like 10 o'clock at night. So anyway, so join us the week after for a topic that I don't remember.
On the web page.
Yes, I did type it into the announcements.
Actually,
which
next
are
week
not
I want to
here.
do anti-Semitism.
Okay, so the next time's going to
Next
be
time will be anti-Semitism.
Okay, so 2 weeks from today, anti-Semitism. Invite your friends. It'll be a good topic. So, anyway, so you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.